Hey, I'm Rob, and it's time for another drum video. When I build a drum, I always give it a name in my mind, and this one I call the Squiggle drum. It is maple and cherry squares, but the joints between those squares is a squiggly line. When I decided to build this drum, I just wanted to see if I could do it. I have no potential buyer in mind. I have no idea if this will even sell. It's just something I wanted to see if I could do it. I tried to do it, and it came out pretty nice, actually. Often when I do these drums, I show carving out the staves, that whole process. I'm trying to save a little bit of time, so I did not show making the stave. When I start with a video, the raw shell is already made, put together, all the staves. It's obviously it's not rounded yet, anything like that. At that point, the drum is actually glued up already. The first thing I want to go is talk about the construction in VCarve Pro, my CAD CAM program. We'll look there at it, then we'll go out to the CNC machine and actually watch the cutting out of it and the finishing process, and we'll end up where we are right now. So for the squiggle drum, here's the basic shape I'm looking for. Got 3 layers, squiggles back and forth, squiggles there. Basically, I'm trying to have these match up right. Notice how when this intersects this line, I want it to be dead center of that arc. That's one of the things I'm trying to keep right. And you would think naturally, I just want to cut on this line. It would all match up. I'm going to show you why that doesn't work. On a previous drum, I tried that and I realized it does not really work that way. Here's just the basic shape we've got, one of the joints. I'm going to put I put a line right there on that one. They'll probably come back and do that again, but if I were to cut that, it's an 1/8 inch bit, and this is going to put on both sides of this line 0.0625, which again is exactly 1/8 inch. So that's the shape an 1/8 inch bit would take. So first of all, I'm not dissecting this diagonal line exactly the middle, so I'm going to put, let's just drag this guy down. It should give me the little symbol there when I dissect it, and I'm going to copy that and do the same thing up here, find the middle, the little bullseye. There we go. So that's the point when I want these actually to match up. Before I do that though, let's go ahead and copy both these guys. I want to show you what I was talking about, why I can't cut on the line. So copy, paste. Let's come down. And now if I go straight down with this one, let's look at this line right here to match up. And you see the problem. It doesn't really match up anymore. Once you start adding diagonal lines in there, diagonal direction, it won't match up anymore. I'll have a gap in there of, that's probably 1/10 thou or more. Let's see what this actually is. Not quite 1/10 though, 9 thou. So it's enough that you actually see it, and I don't want that. And plus, I want these to dissect. So when I glue it back together, that joint will match up. The lines up and down will line up exactly right. So that's why I'm doing this step right here. So now if I were to cut that out, let's draw a little 1/8 inch circle, which represents the router bit. You see that it would not match up anymore. So I'm going to grab that line again. So let's keep going down. It's a little below. This one will go a little above. And that's enough. There's actually a gap there now, just a slight little gap. That's the logic I did behind this. So let's close this window up. Now I'm in a different project for VCarve Pro. This one's a rotary project instead of a flat project or a single-sided flat. What do they call that? Single-sided, okay. This one's a rotary, and 13.875 is the size of the drum. You can look at my basic settings there, though it's not really that important. I drew these lines here on the stave, how they're going to work, but that's just for me to help set things up. That is never going to be used on the rotary side. That's all how we build the shell before it even gets to the rotary machine. And let's go to the other side. Look here, you can see again how I was using an 1/8 inch circle to represent the router bit. You see there's just enough clearance there to fit between those two. If you look carefully, these don't line up quite. You can see how the halfway point to that edge there lines up here, and the halfway point of this one lines up here. So when we glue this all together, these 2 points should match up correctly. Hopefully I can make sense of that later when I show the actual drum. So we got a test alignment, I'm calling this one. All I'm going to do is put a V bit into the CNC machine and align everything up so it follows this edge perfectly. That'll be a joint. I want that bit to follow it exactly right, because if I don't line up right, then when I glue it together, it won't work in the end. So it's important I get this lined up exactly oriented on a joint, just like that. Then here's when I will cut out that slot there. Let's go to 3D preview and preview that visible toolpath. It's going to cut a slot in here 1/2 inch deep. The shell is deeper than that, so this will not cut all the way through, even though on this orientation, this goes much deeper than 1/2 inch visual representation, but in reality, it's going to be about 3/4 inch deep at this point. You look right here, you can see when I put the mouse on open spot, it's minus 0.5. Now, eventually, I'm going to use a jigsaw to cut very carefully on that cutout part. I don't want to make any mistakes, go over the edge here. So what I decided to do is I made pockets. Preview that toolpath. We'll put the mouse here. Again, look down here. Now it's 0.9 deep. And the shell, like I said, is about 3/4 inch deep. So it's going to cut all the way through the shell. So now when I get the jigsaw out, I'll just cut from here to here. So I'll have to cut. And honestly, if I do this again, I'm going to make it half this size or less. I don't need much to hold that shell in place. I'll just cut a little bit off there. Once I'm done getting these 3 separate pieces, I will take those to the router table, and I'll use a contouring bit, so one with a ball bearing on the end. I'll follow that edge and get a nice straight up and down edge all the way along, all the way around the drum. Then once I have that, I can glue these together. I'll move everything up a half step, or how am I going to call these joints, but move it up so it gets the right image I want and glue it back together. In theory, it should work out great. Let's hone out the machine and start cutting on the shell. And like I said, I'm not going to go through building this shell, the raw shell to start with. I've done enough videos already on the wavy staves, how that works. I'll do another full video just on that process at some point in the future, but not today. I'm trying to keep this a little bit shorter. At this point, I have mounted the drum on the CNC machine. You can see the staves are alternating between maple and cherry with the wavy pattern. The first step is to round the drum, but not down to the final dimension. I want this to be a little bit oversized at this point. Whenever I glue up a drum, it's always slightly out of round, a little bit egg-shaped or oval-shaped, whatever you want to call it. I need to do this rounding to get it to be a perfect circle. That way, when I split it in thirds and rotate it a little bit, it'll come back and match up exactly right. As I talked about in the design phase, I'm now using an 1/8 inch end mill to score down a 1/2 inch with the wavy design. The design repeats 20 times, and there's 20 staves, so it should match up exactly right every time there's a seam between staves. It would probably be easier if I used a 1/4 inch end mill for this versus an 1/8 inch, but the wider the gap, the harder it is to get these undulating lines or the squiggle lines to match up. So I'm going with an 1/8 inch bit. I already mentioned this when I was going over the design in the CAD/CAM program, but the next step now is to cut pockets following these squiggle lines so I can cut through the shell at certain points, making it easier to separate later with my scroll saw. I've removed the drum from the CNC machine, obviously, and taken over to my very messy bench. If you look inside the drum, you can see where it's scored through those holes I talked about before. Now I can put the jigsaw blade through one of those scored holes and simply cut to the next scored hole. Should be easy. And like I said before, if I did this again, I'd make those holes a little bigger so it's a shorter path for the jigsaw to cut. But this worked fine. I was nervous about touching the edge and leaving a mark on the drum, but that wasn't actually an issue. I was very careful and slow doing this. Off camera, I trimmed up the edges where the drum splits using a flush trim router bit. I don't normally record those on video because anytime I'm using a dangerous tool and I'm recording, I worry more about getting a good shot than about cutting fingers off. So I've decided I will not show those on videos anymore. I've already glued up the first 2 rings, and now I'm going to glue up the 3rd ring to those 2. I'm sure there's a better, fancier, more expensive way of getting a nice even coat of glue on the surface, but I've decided the old fingers work better than anything else for me. People have pointed out a few times in the past I use a lot of glue on things, and that's true. I'd rather go a little too much glue than not enough, so there'll be some leak out, but I'm going to skim this again on the CNC, so I don't really care if there's a little extra squeeze out glue. Now I'm adding the clamps to the drum. I was worried about getting the cylinders to line up exactly right, and actually they came together with very little effort. I was pleasantly surprised how easy this step was. After letting the glue cure overnight, I mounted the drum back on the CNC machine. This time I'm skimming it down to the final dimensions. After the skim is complete, I switch over to an 1/8 inch ball nose and do the bearing edge for both the top and bottom of the drum. Off camera, I use the router table to clean up the top and bottom edges of the drum, and then I also skimmed the inside of the drum off camera. I sanded down to 400 grit, and then I applied Odie's oil. It's a hard wax oil finish. Odie's oil is an easy finish to apply. Just wipe it on, wait a little bit, wipe it back off, any excess. It does a good job in that it penetrates, it hardens the wood a little bit, it darkens the wood, which I like in this case. Some cases I don't want to darken the wood, so I won't use it there. In general, I'm kind of liking this finish. It's easy to use, it's durable, and it gives good results in the end. Here are a few final shots of the drum. I have to say I really enjoyed building this drum. All the techniques I tried ended up working out, and I have a beautiful drum. Again, I'm not sure if anybody actually will want this drum. I hope they do, but if not, that's fine too. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a like and consider subscribing to my channel. Have a great day, everyone.